The first time Caroline mentioned her friend, I brushed it off as the innocent ramblings of a little girl. She was just 3 years old, after all. But when she kept talking about Anna, day after day, year after year, my dismissive thoughts turned into something far more unsettling. The stories she told weren't like the usual childhood fantasies I had grown accustomed to. These were darker, more real, and full of a depth that shouldn't have been there. Anna wasn't just a figment of Caroline's imagination. She was something else entirely. Anna, Caroline said, had lived in the same apartment complex where we now resided. This, on its own, wasn't entirely strange. But then Caroline began to speak of Anna's family, a family that didn't exist anywhere, at least not in the way Caroline described them. Anna's family had once lived on a farm, Caroline told me, a farm that had long since faded from the memory of our town. Anna's family had consisted of her mother, father, and 3 older brothers. Anna was the youngest, a cherished child who loved to ride horses. But it was the way Caroline spoke of Anna's accident that began to send chills down my spine. Anna, according to Caroline, had fallen off a horse. The horse, startled or unbalanced, had stepped on her. And after that day, no one in Anna's family spoke to her again. Caroline said that Anna had been abandoned, left alone, in silence, until someone finally heard her. Until Caroline did. Anna told me she was alone, Caroline said one night, her voice a whisper in the quiet of the house. No one ever heard her, until I did. I couldn't shake the unease that settled in my chest. It wasn't just a child's fantasy anymore. It felt like something more, something dark and real. The way Caroline spoke of Anna, with such familiarity and ease, as if she were sitting right next to her, made my blood run cold. It wasn't just a game. Caroline had formed a bond with Anna that felt like it had been forged in some deep, unexplainable place. The stories continued, becoming more vivid and unsettling. Anna, Caroline told me, had lived in the house we now occupied. Anna spoke of her family's house, an old farmhouse with the scent of hay in the air, the sound of horses' hooves echoing in the distance. The details were specific, too precise for a child's imagination, and I had never told Caroline about any of it. One afternoon, when Caroline was 5, we went to Knott's Berry Farm. It was a beautiful day, filled with the laughter of families and the screams of roller coaster riders. Caroline and I were with my ex-husband and his parents, enjoying the moment, when I overheard Caroline talking to herself. I turned, expecting to see her chatting with another child or imagining something cute, but instead I heard her soft, serious voice. "Mama," Caroline said, "I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to Anna." I felt the world shift around me. My mother-in-law, who had overheard Caroline's words, smiled dismissively. "It's just an imaginary friend," she said with a chuckle. "Nothing to worry about." But I knew better. "No, Grandma," Caroline said, her voice firm. "I'm talking to Anna." I could feel a cold sweat form on my brow. There was no way I could explain away this feeling that was beginning to settle deep in my gut. The truth was, I had no idea who Anna was, yet I felt like I already knew her too well. Later that day, as we walked past the pony rides, Caroline stopped. She stared at the ponies, her expression unreadable. I noticed the hesitation in her eyes. Caroline had always been terrified of horses. The thought of getting near them had always sent her into fits of fear. But today, something was different. "I want to ride the pony," Caroline said softly, her gaze fixed on the animals. "Are you sure?" I asked, trying to hide the unease creeping up on me. "You've never liked horses before." Caroline smiled in that way she had when she was talking to Anna. "Anna says I'll love it. She says I'll be fine. She says if I fall, there will be people around, and I'll be okay." I didn't know how to respond. The words Caroline spoke felt like they didn't belong to her. They were too calm, too knowing. And the way she added that last sentence, it made my blood run cold. "Anna died because she was alone," Caroline whispered, barely audible above the noise around us. "But I won't be alone. I'll be fine." Her grandmother laughed it off, but I couldn't shake the chill that had settled in my bones. How did Caroline know these things? Why was she speaking as if she were drawing on something deeper than childhood imagination? Time passed, and the strange presence of Anna continued to hang over our lives, like an invisible shadow that followed us wherever we went. I tried to convince myself it was just a phase, a strange but harmless phase. I ignored the creeping suspicion in my chest, but every time Caroline spoke of Anna, it grew harder to dismiss. There was something about Anna, something wrong, and it felt like she wasn't just a part of Caroline's childhood. When Caroline turned 12, she mentioned Anna again. It had been years since Anna's name had come up in conversation, and I hoped, that the bond between them had faded. But one quiet evening, as we sat together watching the sunset from the porch, Caroline spoke in that same soft, distant voice. "Mom," Caroline said, looking out at the fading light, "I haven't seen Anna in a while." I felt my heart skip. "Where is she?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Caroline's eyes were distant, but she turned to me with a soft smile. "She's safe now. She doesn't need me anymore. She had to leave." A lump formed in my throat as I tried to process her words. "What do you mean, she had to leave?" Caroline hesitated for a moment before she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Anna stayed with me for so long because she didn't want me to die young like she did. She didn't want me to be alone." I didn't understand what she meant, but in that moment, the air felt heavier, suffocating. The world seemed to close in around me, and the silence between us was unbearable. How could Caroline know that? How could she speak of Anna's death with such certainty? That night, as I lay in bed, I heard something, a faint whisper, so quiet it might have been my imagination. "Caroline." I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around the room, but it was empty. The air was still, heavy, and I felt something cold and dark hanging in the space. I glanced toward Caroline's room, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Had Anna never left? I stood from my bed and walked to Caroline's room, my footsteps soundless on the floor. The door was slightly ajar, and I hesitated before pushing it open. The faintest glow of moonlight lit the room, casting long shadows on the walls. Caroline sat at the edge of her bed, facing the wall, her back to me. She wasn't alone. "Caroline," I whispered, my voice trembling, but she didn't turn. I stepped closer, my heart hammering in my chest, and that's when I heard it, softly, just above a whisper. "Mom, she's here. Anna's here." I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind racing. I turned to leave, but then I heard it, Anna's voice, clear and chilling. "You're not alone, Caroline. I'm here." The room felt colder, the shadows stretching out like dark fingers. And I knew, with a certainty I couldn't explain, that Anna had never left. She never had. And Caroline was never truly alone.